Hello, nonprofit leaders. I'm Sarah Olivieri, your host, and this podcast is here to assist people like you, executive directors, board members, and other nonprofit leaders make a bigger impact with insights, tips, and lessons learned from nonprofit leaders and experts. Having been an executive director, a board member, and now a consultant and coach, I truly understand the challenges you face. And that's why I'm here. I'm all about working smarter, not harder, so you can make a bigger impact without the burnout. And so is our sponsor, DonorBox. DonorBox isn't just a suite of helpful fundraising tools, it's a partner that helps you raise more money and supports you in retaining your donors. I love their forward-thinking approach. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. And don't forget to sign up for the Inspired Nonprofit Leadership newsletter, where you'll get bite-sized, actionable tips just for nonprofit leaders like you, delivered weekly to your inbox. Sign up at inspirednonprofitleadership.com/sign up. Okay, let's dive into today's episode. My guest for this episode is Sherry Quam Taylor, who works with business-minded nonprofit CEOs, some of my favorite folks, whose strategic plans require expansive budgets and larger amounts of general operating revenue for growth. And we're going to be talking about how she does that today so that she trains nonprofits to be investment level ready and see their full revenue potential. All right, Sherry, before we dive into things fundraising and unrestricted revenue, would you just share something about yourself personally?
Sure, Sarah. Good morning. You know, what I usually share personally is that I have two college-age daughters, and they're actually internationally adopted from India. And so we actually made our first official trip back to India over the holidays. And it's been about 9.5 years since our girls joined our family. And so, you know, we're a multicultural family, and full saris and bangles around here. And people just don't know that about me. And it's really a fun part of our journey.
I love that. I love that. I really, I think that's so, if you are, like I'm a white woman, people don't know that I have a mixed race son, and they really like, and I think that's such an important something to share out in the world, because us folks with race families experience unique things that I think it's a story that's often not well told.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we've tried to continue that conversation. Like it's really easy just, to get the stares in certain states that we go in, and it's just even with our girls, it's like, oh yeah, they're staring at us, or that they see something different, but it is what it is. That's what our family looks like.
Yeah, I love it. All right, well, let's talk about fundraising. And I want to start with, because so many, when I, look at nonprofit leaders and they're thinking about fundraising and the conversation about fundraising, they're always like, we need grants, we need to run some social media campaign. But if you then dig in and ask them, like, have you really thought about how to prioritize fundraising? Like, where are you with like major gifts or securing significant revenue? The successful ones are always like, oh yeah, we got a lot of that. We just don't talk about it much. And those who are struggling, I find they're like, it feels so hard. Like they don't want to do it or they don't see it working. So I wanted to start by getting your take on that kind of broader landscape at where nonprofits are at with fundraising, and if and why they should be thinking about investment level giving, as
Yeah.
the phrase that I think
So
you
good,
used
so
that I
good.
love.
You know, Sarah, one time I started one of these podcasts, and the host's first question to me was, Sherry, why have you formulated your whole business around securing general operating revenue when that's the hardest gift to get? And I was like, perhaps because I don't agree with that. Like, I don't think that is really the case. I think a lot of it is a skill set issue where, the nonprofit sector has told us fundraising is what you just said. It's applications and deadlines and appeals and prizes and paddles and all of these things. And some of those things are good. However, that shift over into relational fundraising, or really wanting, in my world, 50 to 75% of your revenue coming from those deep relationships where you're sitting down one-on-one and guiding those donors to their best gift, like that's where I want the majority of people's time spent. And so I do think, Sarah, it's another one of those invisible scripts that like we have in the sector of people only want to fund projects, or we got to go hunt for more grant application or grant opportunities. And we aren't taking the time to really deeply sit kind of CEO to CEO with investment level donors and deeply, deeply get to know them. And so I always tell people, I think there's a whole nother level of fundraising that many people don't understand, because if we Google right now how to fundraise, how to scale my organization, it's going to come up with 32 transactional ideas. And so I just think it's this block in people's heads. They either haven't had that training, or what do I really mean? And or like the past to say, you can stop doing some of that stuff so your hours can be better aligned with higher ROI dollars.
Yeah. And just for those folks out there who aren't familiar with ROI, can you talk about what that means?
Thank you. Yeah, so this is just your hours aligning with dollars, so it's your return on investment. And so if you think of, I like to use round numbers on podcasts, Sarah. If we're thinking like you need to raise 2 million this year, I want to make sure that we're doing that in the most efficient and effective way. And so what wouldn't be the most efficient or effective way would be, we need to grind harder. And so let's add events, add appeals, add all of those time consuming, energy sucking activities. I only want those activities yielding about 25% of your revenue. And so then we have to do a check of like, I think I'm spending more than 25% of my day or my week on those types of activities. And so I want people to shift and really say, if we had to bring in $2 million, whether you're a $2 million organization or you're a $30 million organization and 28 of it is federal funding and the other two is charitable, what is the best way for me to raise that with the hours that I have available and with the team that I have? And so we just want to make sure that every hour you're spending is going to yield the most results. And hear me say, every size gift is important. I'm not like, we only want big gifts. However, we want to provide such an experience that every donor would give their best gift. And so I just have so many organizations come to me where they have great donors, but they might be kind of, okay, here's $500. And down the road, that person's writing $50,000 checks. And so we need to match that ask and that activity to that donor's capacity. So that's what I think of when it's high ROI or hours to dollars fundraising.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I want everybody to just, if you're not familiar with the concept of ROI, maybe if you don't do anything else as a nonprofit leader, get familiar with this concept, start falling in love. It is like the technical term, if you've heard the phrase, like work smarter, not
Yes.
harder. That is where, ROI is actually implementing the working smarter, not harder. And it's so important in raising money, in delivering impact, in like everything you do comes down as a leader to having this conversation over and over again. What is the way we can get the most return, the most out of for our efforts going in?
Yeah, you nailed it.
I also want to circle back to, this idea that this kind of relational fundraising is hard. So, because if we do one thing today, I want to dispel that myth. So,
Yeah.
can you take us through, when you work with a client, what does that look like? What is that journey for them of, activities they're doing and that emotional journey that starts them to get to the point of this is actually fun, rewarding, and easy,
Yeah,
or something
totally,
like that?
totally. I always tell my clients, like these, first 6 months, this is when you're a faith-based organization, because we're trusting that the things we're stopping doing and the things that we're starting to doing are going to pay off. Because we know it takes the majority of donors 6 months to 24 months to move into that deeper relationship and eventually give their best gift. And so this is very much the tortoise fundraising versus the hare. And I would say the first thing we're always working on is that feels so counterintuitive because we've been told everything is fast and urgent and deadline and driven. And it's like, okay, this actually feels slower, and it should feel slower. If we're going to take the time, not be desperate, build a proper pipeline, and eventually be sitting down to ask for that donor's best gift, it should feel slower, because that's the right way to do it, and that's the sustainable way to do it. I think of like
Do you
shift.
think that
Yeah,
that first phase is why so many people think it's hard?
I think
Because they like
so.
dip their toe into that phase and they're like, oh, this feels bad.
Yeah, and it's like we've been taught, don't leave $1,000 on the table. Just get it in. Just get it in. It's like, but wait, what if there's some areas of clarity? I always say, if a major donor doesn't understand your plans, like, why should I give to you every year? Like, where are you going? What's the broader thing you're solving? If they don't understand your programs, like, I kind of get what you do, but don't totally get what you do. And if they don't understand your organization's financial need, this is a huge part of my work to say, hey, we have a $6 million need this year. Can I walk you through that? Versus always hearing, we got to hit 500K on the gala. We got to get 100K on the 5K. We're not sitting down and presenting that overall need, and that I'm doing this of like business person to business person discussion of, why are we a great organization that you should invest in? Why should you invest in us over others? And so oftentimes that shift into, I mean, I'll even say something that really scares people, and I'll say, like, hey, what if we don't want your major donor giving at the gala this year? And they're like, wait, what? I'm like, what if you just want that person to be a guest at your table, to experience something new, sit with a board member? Because we have a bigger ask for that person planned by the year end. And so, like, just these little, like, get it in as fast as we can, is really a huge part of the shift in thinking multi, or thinking, we have a $5 million need this year. Within 5 years, we're going to have a $10 million need. So let's really pipeline and think long term about what this fundraising strategy looks like. And so I want everybody to hit their annual goals and all of those things, but we have to be also building the pipeline that is yielding the long term dollars. And that gives us confidence to say, you know what, I'm not going to ask that person for that $1,000 that I do every March. I'm going to wait it out, because I'm going to be asking them maybe to invest $10,000 in the fall, and to be confident in that. And that's very counterintuitive in fundraising.
That's, so many good nuggets in there. One, it made me think of, before I did leadership training and consulting in my business, I was actually a marketing agency for nonprofits, and we built websites and we developed. And one of the things we did in developing the website content is we would build avatars for donors and clients. And how do you build a great avatar? You go out and interview them. So I had gone out and I was interviewing this client's, top list of top dozen donors. And I'm just, it's just me. I'm not making them an ask. I don't even work, I'm just the contractor. But I asked them things in this interview like, what do you like to read? Where do you spend your time? I'm just asking about
Who are
them
you?
as a person. And the executive director let me know a couple of weeks later that, one of those donors, because she'd had a conversation just with me about whatever, about herself, sent in her largest, like an extra gift, like extra large.
You're hired, Sarah.
She was just like, boom. I was like, website paid for itself, But that's the power when people feel like they're not just always being asked, but that people are taking time to get to know them too, because it was just 100% interview about them and what they like, and boom, and no ask at all, and boom, the gift comes. So I think, like, if people need to hear, like, these things happen, they totally happen. It does, but what you're saying about it feeling slow at first, or, that counterintuitive, and pushing through that, I'd love for you to share a little bit about like what is it that people need to push through that first phase that
good.
feels hard?
That's good. Kind of a boring answer to that, but gosh, it's important, is like, this all has to be backed up by the numbers. And what I mean by that is, oftentimes people will come to me and say, well, I'll say, what is your budget? And they're like, well, we have a 2.72 approved budget. And I'll say, okay, is that what you need to raise this year? And it's like, well, well, no, we haven't done staff raises. We need to build the reserve. We're losing a federal grant. All of these things. And I'll say, well, what is your true need? Because we need to anchor the team, the activities, the structure based on the need. And I'm not saying we need 20 million, we're a $3 million org and we'd like, 5X it. But what I am saying is we have to pivot back and understand what is the path to this example to $3 million. If we have a 2.75 budget and we're going to raise to $3 million, what is the path to three? Not, well, we hope we hope we could, if we could, it's our stretch budget. So do we need it or not? We need it. So let's put a plan in place to that. And so as we start making these shifts, we have to know that I call it like a financing plan versus before we start any fundraising plan, like what is the path to the 3 million in that model that, 50 to 75% coming from relational revenue, 25% coming from mass grassroots. That all of a sudden tells you like, hold on a second, but back to our hours, but we're spending all of our time on these 2 rows that are mass grassroots or galas or Giving Tuesday and that kind of thing. And so usually when we're moving into those new activities and we're trying to see if we can get those first meetings with donors who we've never talked to, it has to be backed up by the numbers. Otherwise we give up and we're like, okay, this isn't working. Let's just send it another appeal. And so like all of this stuff, like the strength of it is that this is an organizational shift. Are we talking in a way? Are we presenting ourselves in a way that really attracts investment level donors who get it and who want to give us general operating revenue? And so that kind of middle ground, I will tell you when clients start, actually, I'll give you an example. I have an amazing client who, before they hired me, they actually decided to press pause on their gala. And I was like, I support that. Let's talk through it. And I don't know, the gala was small. And so maybe it was yielding about $150K a year. And so we moved into this cadence and yeah, it's like month 5, month 6. And we're like, okay, so the gala like usually is happening this month and we're nervous. I gotcha. And so we started having one-on-ones with people who had always historically come to our gala. And within a couple of months, out of 5 conversations, they had raised more than the gala the previous year. And admittedly so, they were like, you know what, we just realized like we didn't know our donors that well. They didn't understand our plans. They didn't really understand our programs, and they didn't understand our financial need. And they responded when we were able to sit down and build that relationship and shift that cadence. And so I love that example because it's like that money was sitting there all along, but it was the fear of like, we got to get every dollar in the door kind of thing.
Yeah, I love that example. And to bring like a marketing nugget on top of that, so often I see folks thinking, well, we have to work on our messaging. And when they say that, they think we need to like update our website or our branding and stuff. And I'm always like, the first step is you just have lots of conversations. Yes. You work on your messaging live, like you and I could work on our messaging right now. And you even get to revise it in the conversation, right? You say something or you hear something, then you watch the person's face, you see how it lands, you can update it. And then after you've had a ton of those conversations and probably brought in a ton of money, then if you still, then you know what the messaging is. It is field tested, it is refined, and then you can go update your marketing assets and your website and stuff if you even need to.
Sarah, you're speaking my
because you might not need to at that point.
Yeah, I'm like, sometimes it's like, well, we're not ready for a major gifts program because first we need to do a database migration. I need to leave behind. I need new board members. I clean the database, whatever it is. And I'm like, you don't need to do that. Let's go talk to people. That it is holding back so many organizations thinking they have to have everything perfect and then go talk to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So true. I'll never forget one week I had 2 clients. One said, well, we actually are pretty well funded and everything's, pretty well organized and together. And we're afraid people won't give to us because we're too together.
Too healthy. Yeah.
And then, right, too healthy. And then another client was like, well, we're really disorganized. We don't have a good website. It's really old. Our brochure is outdated. We're afraid donors won't give to us because we're too unhealthy, right? And it's like, but both work, right?
Yes.
If you need help to improve because you're behind where you'd like to be, or you need help to improve because you'd like to get to the next
Yeah.
level,
I-
they're both compelling.
Both compelling. And that's a hilarious kind of example because, or two examples. These are these invisible scripts that like we just like say, and like that's not, is that always true? Is that ultimately, true in every case? No. But just like people won't give to, gen ops, or people only want projects, or all of these things that we tell ourselves, um, that those are not ultimately true in 100% of the situations. And it is so fun to watch people actually start moving into these conversations once they've been equipped. And so I think early on I said like it's a skill set issue. And what I mean by that is our teams are great at events and applications and campaigns, and you know they're killing it in so many areas. But what I hear when it comes to like, wait, you want me to call that person and like have coffee and have what am I saying to them? I hear like I kind of don't know what I don't know. Like, what am I exactly doing in that meeting? And so once teams are equipped to, walk through the financial need, could I share with you how we're funded? Oh, I figured my tax dollars paid for this, or I figured, you were funded by the camping fees or whatever it is. Like, how do we walk through that budgeted need? How do we walk through how we invest gifts? We're leaving so much on the table when we don't pivot into the financial story of the organization or the growth story of the organization. We're killing it on like, here's why we exist, and here are the stats that are, bring tears to our eyes, and here's stories of changed lives. Awesome. But for mid and major level donors to attract those large general operating gifts, they need more. And so we got to move into that deeper conversation, and that CEO to CEO conversation. Usually they're like, oh, so of course you need me to give this way. Well, I just wasn't giving you an unrestricted gift because you always ask for this, or you always ask for my table sponsorship, or you ask for my, the project based giving. So it's so fun to watch teams learn how to have these deeper conversations, take that time, and for them to be shocked when they're like, that donor was like, sure, I can do that. Happy to pivot my gift. I'm always like, yeah, because we've never asked them before. Yeah. Hmm. Ooh, that's a really good question, Sarah. I would measure success by like the openness to the team. Like, some teams I work with, it's very scary, and it's just like we don't see it. Or like, oh, well, I add all of this onto what I'm currently doing. Maybe that's like the fear. And I'm like, that's the point. We got to stop doing half the things that you're doing. It never, yeah, freeing up time. Freeing up time, and then saying, things like, okay, so we have 4 events during the year, and 3/4 of our team spends all their time on these 4 events, and they're not yielding half of what our budget is. Do we need to just have a conversation about pulling one of those away, and that like pass to say, it's okay. The money's going to come. Like, maybe those, let's look at it. Let's look which one maybe is the least efficient, or is taking the most hours from our team that then could be used in other ways. And so that fear sometimes is, it's interesting actually. Sometimes I think the fear is a little bit more from the development team side. And maybe it's just that I attract an executive director who's like, foot on the gas pedal. We need to double, and it's like, thank you. Let's go. And so it is kind of a fun balance for me sometimes to be working with a very visionary, growth-minded leader, and then a development team who's like, we want to be there, but like we don't see the path to that. That's really like where I kind of stand in the middle. Yeah. Yes. Mm, yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. And I think that data, like a huge, which seems very practical to me, but it is typically an eye opener to people. I'll always ask for, what did you make at your, golf outing, and what did it cost to host that? Rarely, when I'm sent those numbers, are hours factored in. You have to factor it in, and it's bonkers the hours that are being spent on raising, and then it's like, okay, did we even make any money at that event? And sometimes the answer is absolutely not, you didn't. And then we actually lost even more money than we're thinking, because if half of those hours were used for relational fundraising or equipping your team to know how to do that, it would be the scaling is just off the charts. And so you have to put your hours into all of these kind of transactional activities to make sure you are accurately kind of saying, is this efficient or not? And so I just see so often it's like, oh, we booked the event for next year already, and like it's just we're on to the next thing. When we aren't being reflective and saying, why is my time or why is my team struggling to move into these types of activities? They don't have the hours in the day. And so we got to get those hours back to move into this more efficient way of fundraising. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. One interesting thing, Sarah, when I like am talking to people who are considering hiring me, and they have that fear of like, I don't know how my team would add another thing to their plate. They're already slammed, they're already swamped. What's interesting is usually and I work with organizations for 12 months. At the end of that time, or near, in the second half, I hear things like, oh my gosh, I can breathe. Or, oh my gosh, I'm working less hours. Or I actually, we're starting to see how much money was sitting on the table. And so it is interesting to me that at the end, I have more relaxed teams, focused teams, um, working less hours sometimes, less spiky and more in that rhythm. And this is where it takes that long to make the shift. I always tell people that they'll say, sure, well, which I don't think I need 12 months. Will you work with me for 3 or 6 months? And I say, no, because it takes 12 months to make this shift. This is a big shift, but it's the sustainable way of fundraising. It's the thing that's going to get you off of that spin cycle. And so teams are, you said the word rhythm or discipline. It's like we're in this new cadence of meetings and discipline and rhythm, and not only with current donors and leading those donors to their best gift, but also just as much pipelining and connecting, which is such a huge part of this, and attracting donors versus like settling. It's like settling, get the $1,000 in, get the sponsorship in, into like how are we're like attracting donors to give larger gifts. We're attracting mission aligned donors, not just warm bodies at the golf outing, but people who really their mission for giving is our mission, and we're moving into these things that like feel more natural than what we were doing before because it's mission aligned.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have these amazing donors who are mission aligned, which is, I think the reason why relational fundraising, major gifts fundraising, however you want to call it or think about it, has such a high ROI is it's twofold. It's partly that people like building relationships and being a supporter is like just how we like operate, right? Supporting people who we have close relationships with and things we care about. And the other piece that I don't think people talk about enough, I know you and I have at least on LinkedIn, is that people who love and support you and who are of means to do that in a very significant way know other people
Yes.
who are also of means and also have shared values and beliefs. And so they start, your best supporters start bringing in your next best supporters for you.
Yes.
You know, and I think about that like donor journey. You might think about like the first gift, or I've been saying, don't call them a donor until they've given you a second
Oh,
gift.
I like that.
And that will get you like really aligned
I like
on,
that.
it's about the second
Yes.
gift, people. You know, the first gift is like a toe in the water or like, well, touch and go.
Right.
And then you get them like a retained donor, a recurring donor, however you want to call it. But you're not done until they're what I call a referring donor,
I
meaning
love it.
they love you so much, they are bringing it. And that's where you really start to get leverage and scale. And that's why it can blow up and why it can be
Yes.
75% of your funding.
You said it.
Because it's so efficient.
It's so good. And that's just like why we then, our current donors, if they're going to lead us toward that second donor and that third donor or that broader network, that's why we need to be in deep relationships with them and not asking them through the paddle raise or the trip to Mexico. It's like we want to attract mission line donors who say, oh my gosh, my colleague needs to know about this mission. They would be really passionate about it, you know. And so we have to do that due diligence with our own database so that then they can be those connectors and referrers. And so I love that. Yeah, hard work starts after you get the first gift. You nailed it.
Absolutely. Well, we are pretty much at time. I'd love to just go on and on because I hope folks will hear this and lap it up. You know, we started out with why people think this is like the hardest type, but it truly is the easiest type. And as I said, I realized we didn't really touch on, so maybe we can take one more moment to touch on, in the end, do donors possibly even like giving unrestricted more than restricted?
Yes.
Once they're well informed?
Yeah. Now, right now in everybody's mind, they're like, yeah, but the Smiths won't. Okay. There's always going to be the one or two who are like, we will never. Fine. Let them give project-based giving. But I'm going to tell you, when a donor understands your plans and at that bigger, broader umbrella level, and they become a true stakeholder in your work, they want to give what is most beneficial to the organization and to the mission. And so, yes is the answer. It really, I promise fundraisers, it's really not that hard, and donors are open to it. It's just, are we leading them through the conversation in the right way and prompting that understanding and taking that time? And man, there's so much money sitting on the table, and you'll start seeing that when you start having these deeper conversations.
Yeah, I love that. Just to kind of frame that up, what I hear you saying is that donors always want to help you the best way they can if they care about you. But they need you to be the guide
You're the
to
leader.
show them how that best way is.
Yes.
And on the other side, as nonprofit leaders, you know that unrestricted funds are worth more to you.
Yes.
They help you help your people more
Yes.
than restricted funds. And all you need to do is be the guide. And what you need most is what they want to give you.
Yes.
You just have to show them that that's the case.
Yeah. Which you got to know your
That
numbers.
has been my experience again and again as well. They want to help you in the best way possible, and they don't know.
They don't know.
So for those of you thinking like, this makes sense, maybe I want to work with Sherry, and let me just put in a plug that anytime you have to go through a steep learning curve or a mucky phase or a scary phase, take a guide who's been there before.
You're so right.
Whether it's, this kind of fundraising or anything else in your organization, that's what you need to do. Is you need a guide to help you navigate the unknown so you don't get, buried in the unknowns and the learning curve. So if you'd love to work with Sherry, potentially, Sherry, who are you looking to work with? Who's a great fit for you? And what's the best way for them to?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of described it today. Right now, my clients, as you can imagine, are organizations that are, have a $2 million budget to, $30, $50 million budget. but oftentimes they're too dependent on one source of revenue. And so that might be federal dollars, that might be reimbursements, earned revenue, or like a big event. And they do want to diversify that revenue. They need more philanthropy coming in, and they want that to be general operating. A lot of my clients have big growth plans, and it might be we want a 2x, or our strategic plan is like, we did it 3 years ago, and we don't have the money to actually put the infrastructure in place that the strategic plan calls for. And so I think growth-minded people who want to put their foot on the gas pedal and know there's a better way, and they're ready to make that shift.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Sherry, and thank you out there for tuning in and everything you do to make our communities better. We need your work so much. I have a small favor to ask of you. If you would take a moment to like and review this podcast wherever you're listening to it, and if you could share it with a colleague or friend who you think would benefit from this or other conversations, that helps everyone grow and make a bigger impact. Until next time, all the best.
You've been listening to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode or the bonus episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review, and be sure to share with your friends and colleagues. Tune in every week for more useful insights and wisdom on nonprofit leadership. Thanks so much for all you do for the communities you serve. Until next time, all the best.